Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Bankroll Burners Poker Podcast. I'm Mike, and I'm here with my co-host Josh.
Welcome again.
And we're here to talk about some more hands and just continue to demonstrate our prowess at losing chips. So why don't we just jump right into it, Josh? I understand you're going to go first this time, so. I heard you were at Encore this week.
That's right, and this is Encore Boston Harbor, the premier poker room of Massachusetts, although I'm sure that some people will take offense to that, given the MGM Springfield exists. But fairly new room. The games play big. There are a lot of complaints about the rake. The rake on all games is 10% up to $10, which is pretty pricey, but the games play really big. The smallest game they have is 1-3 with a $500 cap, which honestly plays like a lot of 2-5 games, so it's a really, really good. I really like the room. I think it has a lot of great action, and I continue to go back.
Yeah, I was there once, and I really liked it. I'm not down here in Jacksonville. I'm not used to getting free drinks at my casino, so I appreciated that. And it's also just like, since it's so new, it's all like clean and doesn't feel seedy at all, which I mean, there's something to be said for that, I would say.
Absolutely. There was also a long time when they had kind of a week, they had a really huge wait list. It was impossible to get a seat because they only had about 15 tables open, but people have finally bullied them into removing some slots for additional tables, and they're always full, so it's a good decision, I think.
Well, okay. I mean, it's probably not a good decision for the casino's bottom line to have fewer slot machines, but thanks to them for caring about us poker players. So, I'll
hop into it. So I'm playing 1-3, and in reference, to Mike's intro, I think my two hands today will really demonstrate my prowess at losing chips. A couple of really interesting hands here. So let's hop into the first one. I am sitting in the small blind in this hand. We're playing full ring, which is 9-handed. Which is great. Love 9-handed play, much better than 10-handed. Bring it.
God.
So the main villain in this hand is going to be under the gun, and they're going to start, as so many 1-3 hands do, with a limp. The low jack. Go ahead.
I have a question about that, actually. So I've heard this from listening to Brad Owen's vlogs, that people will often limp really strong hands under the gun as a trap. And have you ever experienced that? Because I don't think I ever have. I've every time someone's limped under the gun, it's been because they have absolute trash. I'm just curious if you've ever experienced that, like that sort of play pattern.
I feel like I guess I have a little bit, but only from weak players who don't really understand hand strength. People like limp call ace king once in a while, I'll see it, or even something as strong as like jacks or tens. I've also heard quite a bit about people doing this sort of trappy behavior where they'll, call with kings under the gun and then plan on re-raising. And I do understand that if you're playing in a suitably aggressive game, that you really want to play, that style, and you think if you think that somebody is going to open the pot, that it's very, very likely, and if you note that level of aggression, I think there is something to be said for sort of folding that kind of play into your game.
Yeah, as long as you can balance it, of course. But I mean, we're talking about balance at 1-3, so.
Well, exactly, and it's kind of like, it almost reminds me of if you've been watching Mariano's vlogs. There are a lot of times when he'll be talking about cold calling 3-bets from out of position with middling pocket pairs, but he'll note that he also does it sometimes with aces and kings to balance and be a little bit harder to punish. So it's just kind of that where you have to be able to balance it, and you actually have to make it happen, because obviously if I'm playing an average 1-3 game and I limp aces under the gun, guess what? We're going 9 ways to a flop.
Oh my god. All right. So under the gun limps.
Under the gun limps, the low jack limps, the cutoff limps, and the button limps. So we've got 4 limpers to me in the small blind with king of clubs, queen of spades. I'm not gonna let 5 other people see a flop for $3, so I elect to bump it up. I go to 25 here, which is a pretty big, I recognize this is a pretty big sizing. Since this game plays relatively deep, I'd say 15 is probably the standard open size at 1-3, which I recognize is pretty large. And so that means that, when I'm looking at 4 limpers, I'm going to go bigger. 25 is, all just about 15 plus 3 for each limper. Even a little low, I could even see going to 30, given that I'm in the small blind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I might even go to 30. So I think I have no problem with the sizing. How deep are you?
So sorry, I realized I forgot that. I am the effective stack at this point with 275, so just shy of 100 big blinds.
Got it. Yeah. Trust me, audience, we will be forgetting things. The whole podcast, we're professionals here at Bankroll Burners. So,
and thankfully, this is an audio only format, so there's no sort of visual aid for you.
Obviously, that would be terrible. All right, so you bump it up to 25 into the four limpers, four limpers.
The big blind folds, the villain in the under the gun, the first limper makes the call, the cutoff calls, and then the button looks at his chips and eventually decides to fold, thankfully.
Okay.
So we're going three ways. Okay. There's about 85 bucks in the pot, so about 75 after rake. And the flop here is going to come ace, queen, jack, rainbow. So ace of spades, queen of diamonds, jack of clubs.
Ace of spades, queen of diamonds, jack of clubs.
Correct.
And you have
king of clubs, queen of spades.
Okay.
So cool. I don't have I don't have a backdoor flush draw at all. I've got second pair and a gut shot. This board, ace, queen, jack, I feel like is very good for me. I can have all the ace kings. I can have all the sets, which none of them really should. They could be showing up here with queen 10. They could be showing up here with queen jack. But I think overall, I should have a really strong range advantage. So with that in mind, I decided to bet quite small. I go with about 20, which is less than 1/3. It's closer to 1/4 pot. I'm really trying to just go small and maximize that range advantage.
Very okay. I like it. I would say there is some consideration here to check this board, even though you have such a strong range advantage. I do kind of like the idea of taking some of your sort of middling strength hands that are going to be able to comfortably call a bet and checking them. Like a weak ace or something like a king, queen, second pair, good kicker. I think you can check this hand. I don't think there's anything wrong with betting it, but I think checking is probably fine being out of position to two people multi-way.
Right. I think that's fair. If I get called, I think there's a lot to. I think it's easy to slow down if we don't improve. I actually think it's one of these weird boards where, it's tough to find raises that the villains really want to do given the texture of the board. I'm almost more scared of a call because a call really represents an ace, and I don't think most villains at 1-3 are gonna bump up like ace 5 offsuit on the flop.
Right, which is a hand they absolutely can have.
So anyway, I decided to go 20. I decided to go small, kind of a block sizing, and under the gun, the limper immediately raises to 75.
Wow, that's a big raise.
That is a big raise. So the cutoff folds quickly. I'm kind of put in a spot here. I guess interested to hear your input.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, so you're blocking the nuts, obviously.
Right.
You're blocking king 10, which is, I have seen so many players limp call king 10 in my time playing low stakes. It's absolutely a hand he can have. They all combos, offsuit combos too. People love to limp call that hand. I don't know if you've had that experience, but that's definitely what I've seen.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I am blocking the nuts. I think the queen is also a really nice card to have. It blocks a ton of, two pairs. Queen jack is probably the most likely two pair to be limp called, which I think having the queen and the king is just a really good, value blocking combo.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. The only logical two pair for him to have is queen jack, and you are blocking it. You are also blocking the nuts. So you have a good candidate for a call here. That being said, I don't know what this guy's bluffs are in this spot. You said it's a rainbow board. It's super favorable to you. So, and you are blocking him from having a gutter with a king, so you're also blocking some draws. And so it's sort of weird. I mean, sometimes people will go crazy with a pair and a flush draw or whatever, but I mean, that's not even possible on this board. So I don't really know what he's bluffing with is the only thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think right as I was sitting down, so this was an older guy, but right as I was sitting down, I saw a really weird hand where he was basically going hog wild and got called and just like had like a hand that made absolutely no sense, like a complete airball bluff with like random undercards. So I thought that like given the size and given the board, I thought that was like a possibility. Although I do agree that, logically there aren't really that many bluffs. I mean, maybe he's doing it with like pocket tens or like 10-9. Like those could be the bluff candidates here.
Sure, although I think pocket tens has enough showdown value that I wouldn't necessarily want to bluff with it in his spot, but can't think too hard about it. Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think you can fold just yet. I feel like that would be a little extreme. So I'm assuming you called.
I did call, yes. So there's about 235 in the pot. I've got about 175 behind. The turn is going to come the Jack of Diamonds.
Interesting.
So the Jack of Diamonds pairs the bottom card here. It also introduces a flush draw in diamonds. And I elect to check here. I'm not the last aggressor, so I think, and I want to, let him bluff if I have to. I'm not gonna, So I elect to check, and he pretty quickly sticks the rest of the stack in for 175.
Huh. It's kind of funny about the Jack pairing. If the dynamic were a little different, where like he was the pre-flop aggressor and you had check called the flop, I actually kind of like a lead on the Jack. Like the weak turn lead where the bottom card pairs and it's very favorable for you as the non-aggressor. Obviously that's not the situation here, obviously, but I'm just theoretically you could maybe think about that's one of those cards you could think about leading on in some circumstances.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the bottom or the middle card pairing are usually pretty good for a check caller's range, but given the raise, that's a little bit less included here. The thing that I found really annoying about this card is it really like further lowers the number of value combos that this guy can have. Like it's a jack, so there's fewer queen jack. It also introduces new bluffs where if he's getting somewhere, if he has two random undercards or suited connectors with a backdoor flush draw, and he could have. There are diamond draws out there to be made as well. So, it was a one.
I guess I would say personally, like, I have almost never seen a low stakes player construct a double barrel that way, even though, like, yes, that is the correct way to do it, but I almost never see it, so much so that until I see a specific player do it, I assume that someone is not doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. And at the time, I was really thinking about, the jack really blocking a ton of, taking a lot of queen jack out of his range. Between my queen and then the queen jack on the board is just, it's pretty unlikely that he's got like a boat here, for example.
Sure, unless he has ace jack off.
Which could be, although I do think he had raised in the past, and there are kind of two kinds of limp callers, like in these sort of games, and he had been raising his like good hands pre-flop.
Okay. Sure, yeah, fair enough. So yeah, but I mean, do you have any other intel on this villain? I mean, is this guy like? I mean, he's limping under the gun. I can't imagine he's like great.
I don't really have much other intel. And I mean, looking at it now, I just think I do think I have way better hands to like continue with. Like there are hands that I could have that have diamonds that, if I have like ace king of diamonds, for example, much better candidate.
Sure.
While it doesn't block queen jack, there's still the jack still kind of blocks queen jack itself. It gives me additional outs with like diamonds if he does have something like king 10. So, I just think I have a ton of better hands to continue with, and I can probably just lay this down and be fine with that.
I agree. I think this is, at the lower stakes, I really think this is just a fold. I mean, if you're playing against someone capable, even then, it's like, it's hard to find bluffs in this spot. I think this is just a lay down.
Yeah, I think I agree with you after reviewing. But anyway, that's not what this podcast is about.
Absolutely not. We do not fold hands here at Bankroll Burners.
I slide in the call. Villain proudly shows king 10 of diamonds, and we move on with our lives.
Very good. Yeah, I assume the river was of no help.
The river was actually at the 3 of diamonds.
Very good. So you were super crushed.
So he went from a straight flush draw to a flush. So yes, we womp womp.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you have better hands there, and yeah, I mean, hey, good for this guy. You know, he flopped the nuts, and he
Yeah,
got
it's one of these things where it's really shows kind of the benefit of exploitative play where I can talk to myself all day long about how I'm blocking the nuts and I'm blocking two pairs, but realistically, most live 1-3 players aren't just triple barreling with garbage. They're like actually just have it when they bet. And I tell you all the time, just make hero folds, don't make hero calls. And now here I am.
Exactly. I mean, one of the most, I would say it's very important in poker to not listen to your own advice. So I'm okay with this. Yeah.
I'm
all
glad
right.
you
Well,
agree. So
yeah,
there's my first punt of the day.
hey, and well, all right. That I guess we can move on to my first hand here. Although I will say to our listeners, particularly on YouTube, when you hear us play a hand and you think that we're not considering something or we could have done it better, which that's always going to be the case for the most part. But if you have some thoughts on a hand, we'd love to hear them in the comments. Absolutely, that would be excellent. Get a lively discussion going.
You can even tell us to fold pre if you want. It's not going to help, but you can say it.
Absolutely. Just fold pre, that's a great comment. always adds a lot. So please let us know to tighten up. I got a hand for that. Coming up next, actually. So,
excellent.
Great segue, Josh. Okay, so this is a hand from an online game. And it's the same kind of situation setup as last week, where it's a very splashy sort of room. It's more like an online home game, rather than a like some kind of card room where there's a bunch of grinders like ACR or what Poker Stars. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know the poker rooms online. So it's not one of those. It's kind of a much more casual, splashy environment. And this is 25 cent, 50 cent. And in this hand, we are playing $130 effective. So that is, close to 300 big blinds. It's like 250 really, I guess, more like.
So it's 25.50.
Yep, 25 cent, 50 cent.
No ante.
No ante.
Cool.
Yep. So we're pretty darn deep in this hand. It doesn't really end up being super relevant. We cover villain or the main villain anyway. I actually think we cover the table or close to it in this particular hand. But we're six-handed, which is actually like six-handed online play is just fantastic. I mean, the pacing is so fast. You get so many hands in. It's great.
Absolutely.
So we're six-handed and we're in the big blind. And the hand, it starts off immediately off the rails. Immediately under the gun, which is, in a six-handed game, it's the low jack. Under the gun raises to $1.05, which is just
basically a min raise.
It's basically a min click. It is
like
not
a tournament raise.
Exactly, it's a tournament raise. You need to raise to 2.1 to big blinds. No, yeah, I don't know what that's about. Typically in this game, people always raise to 3x. There are some folks who like to even raise a little bigger. Not that no one ever min raises, but it's pretty unusual. But that's what happened here. This guy raises to $1.05. And the table doesn't really seem to think much of it because the hijack calls, the cutoff calls, and the button calls.
Okay.
Yep. So not quite a family pot, though, because the small blind folds. And we are 55 cents to complete from the big blind. So we can have a pretty wide range here.
It sounds like you're going to tell me some garbage.
Well, my hand, Josh, is 3 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds.
Okay.
Yeah. Not an incredible hand. I don't think it's, the worst thing in the world, though. Like, you got to have a little splash in you if you want to continue to be someone people enjoy playing against. So I think it's okay to, in a spot where you got to complete for basically a big blind to win. You're getting 1,000,000 to 1 to toss in a call here.
Well, I'll say two things about this. And the first is in favor is that, yes, absolutely, in these sort of home style games, it's important to keep your VPIP reasonably decent, especially six-handed. And, calling in the big blind for 50 cents more, it tends to be a pretty good way to do that because you're just not paying that much more. You're still getting good odds. The other note, and a bit more critical, is just to really consider when you're this deep, all the reverse implied odds that are going to come with actually making your hands. You kind of have to be willing and able to fold to, really serious aggression in certain scenarios, even if you do make like a really bad flush, for example. Mm-hmm. If the flush comes in and the villains seem unconcerned and there's some kind of crazy action, you just kind of have to consider that when you're this deep.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, we talked about reverse implied odds a bit last week, and for viewers or listeners who aren't familiar, reverse implied odds is the idea that, like, if you have a draw or you have a hand that isn't made, and then you make your hand, can you actually lose way more money by doing that? If you make a small flush and someone makes a bigger flush, and when you're really deep, 250 big blinds deep, that's a big concern. Am I going to get stacked here because I make a 5 high flush and someone makes an ace high flush like a normal person? So, it's right. Definitely a pretty big concern with this hand, and possibly a good reason for you to write fold pre in the comments. So feel free. But that's not what happens here. We call. And, I'll say about this hand, this is an example of a hand where I personally am really bad. This is another reason I should have folded. I'm really bad at playing like weird, unusual scenarios that don't come up a lot. Like super multi-way pots where it was barely a raise, and then there's weird action, which there is about to be. I have a terrible track record in pots like these.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, there's 550 in the pot. So let's go to the flop.
The flop is 5 of spades, 3 of spades, deuce of hearts. So, wow. Yeah, we make top 2, baby. And I think, like, if this were heads up, I might lead here. But this is not heads up, so I check. And and it checks all the way around through the pre-flop aggressor through to the button, who then bets pot. He bets 550 into 550. And this is where I make, I think, this is a big mistake I think in terms of missed value here. I just call. Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually think just calling is okay into this sort of sizing. When people polarize, I think, there's really less value to be had raising, I feel like, because they're really, theoretically, they're supposed to be representing either the nuts, which in this case is probably a set, given that it's a limped pot. He could have a set of deuces, he could have a set of threes, he could have a set of fives. He could have ace or it's a straight. And I mean, you called with 5-3 suited. He's in the button. He could probably call with 6-4 suited. I've seen crazier. Definitely ace-4. He could have. So given that that's sort of the range he's supposed to be representing, and his bluffs, may not be able to call a raise anyway, although really they should be, because there's not a ton of value hands, and so his bluffs are probably going to be mostly flush draws, maybe some weird 4x with a spade or something. I definitely don't hate just calling. I just think that when they're polarizing like this, they're really representing such a thick value range.
I think that's fair, like in theory. But if we go back to the exploitative play, in my experience in these sort of rooms with splashy play, when it's sort of like a really small pot, because like a bunch of people, it's a limped pot, or in this rare scenario, like a quasi limped pot. People tend to use very large sizing, and I don't even think that's bad. I think that's probably correct. So yeah, that could be kind of what's going on here, and in that case, I think raising is absolutely in order. If he's got like ace 5 and he's like, I got top pair and a gut shot, like, let's go, baby.
Absolutely. So, yeah, that's a good point. And I think given that dynamic, then definitely there's value to be had by raising. I mean, really, given that the under the gun, hijack, and cutoff all checked this board, it seems relatively unlikely that they've got anything stronger than you, unless they are going for a check raise. So I see your point, and I'm not upset about the call, just given the sort of usual dynamics of that bet sizing.
Yeah, I think, okay, well, that's fair. I mean, the reason I'm so upset about the call, so first of all, everyone else folds, so it's just heads up. And on the turn, we run into, or the turn runs out the 8 of hearts. So which is puts a backdoor, a second flush draw out there. It's an overcard, and what do you do on this card? I guess
Well, I mean, I'm inclined to say check just because I usually check, but given I probably just want to check actually. Given the polarization that I just talked about, I don't think he should have that many like backdoor flush draws with that take a pot sizing on the flop. So I'm happy to check and see and evaluate. If he checks back, we can pretty much discount like sets and straights. And then he's probably working with something like a worse two pair or a spade draw, probably. So I'm happy to check and evaluate. And if he bets big again, I think we start being a little worried, but we're not really in the mood to go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, so that's all fair, and I do check. I think that's probably you're just supposed to check this board, and he checks back, and I immediately know I have the best hand at this point,
right.
And that's why I was like kind of kicking myself. I'm like, why didn't I raise? I think I could have got some more value from a raise. Especially now if he has a draw, and his draw misses, I'm like, that's it, no more value for me.
Right.
So, but
I think that's all fair. And it's just one of those things where if you raise, to a fairly large sizing, given his sizing, he might just like fold a draw, thinking that he's like not in good shape.
That's fair. So. That's fair. Yeah. Okay. That's true. I am unblocking all the draws with my top two, which is kind of nice in that spot and on the flop to favor a flop raise. But
absolutely.
I'm also unblocking the nuts. So, So the river is the jack of clubs, so everything bricks.
Yep.
And I guess the question is, what do we do here? What is the correct line? Because this is where I was saying like, I really don't know what, like, I'll tell you what I did later. I'm not sure if it was good or bad. Like this is one of those spots where like the hand was weird, the setup was weird, and I just didn't know what to do. So what do you think about this spot?
Well, I think given everything we both just said on the turn, I think this is kind of a sad check spot where, given that he just checked back, we pretty much have the best hand. And given his I guess, it's a good point exploitatively that he doesn't have to have something super polarized. And if he has something like, as you pointed out, ace five, we might be able to get a bet out of him, if we bet relatively small. So actually, as I say that, I almost like betting kind of small, like somewhere around a third pot, where if he has one of these middling value hands that he decided to bet big just because, it was a small pot, then we can get a call. And if he has a missed draw, he might look at our sizing and consider, turning his hand into a bluff. So actually, as I was going to say check instinctively, but I think given, your point about him exploitatively having, medium value hands, I think if that's ever the case, and he's not going to bet again if he had something like a five or pocket sixes or something like that, that's the best way to get out the value.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the other, I mean, your thought about checking, I'm assuming you're saying like check and hope he bluffs, so we bluff catch. Like that's kind of what you're getting at. Like he has a busted draw, which I think is totally reasonable. And I think betting small makes a lot of sense to get value from some of those hands. It's interesting you said pocket sixes. I didn't even thought about it, but he could very well have 6-6, 7-7, even
that's pretty much
9 that he's like making some kind, like on the flop, he's just like, I have an overpair, like my hand is awesome. So.
I think that 9-9 he definitely raises, why I kind of restricted to sixes and sevens, because it is a limp spot. So I think people to generally draw the line at pocket eights and better, they start actually bumping it up before the flop.
Sure. So at the time, I'll tell you what I did. I thought I was like, I have the best hand. But he showed some strength on the flop, so I should, I could probably get called by something, so I should bet big, which is just like, what am I trying to get called by betting big? I don't really know. Honestly, I don't know what his strong hands are that lose to mine that call. Other than he have 5 deuce or something crazy like that. I don't know. I mean, who would call with 5 deuce or 5-3? That's nuts.
Another spot where we can pull out our favorite buzzwords like merging, where you there's two draws that missed. There's a million straight draws that missed. Yes, you unblock them, but if he has one of those draws, or like if he has ace five and he's unblocking the draw, then he might be like, he might be more inclined to call you because he's unblocking the draws and they all missed. And if you bet big, it looks more like you missed a draw than if you bet small. So I think that still has merit. If he's got one of those middling value hands, he still might call you if you bet big. Although I'm not sure that he will, but it is possible that he interprets it that way.
Yeah, well, he calls me very quickly, and then I win, and he mucks. So I don't know. I don't know what happened, what he had, that he was very confidently calling me off. But I bet 1250, and he called very quickly. So I bet about 3/4 pot.
So it's kind of one of those things where I think making a small bet is really good if he winds up having a draw that he's going to turn into a bluff some of the time, just because he really shouldn't have any value that he's raising with after checking back the turn. But if you think he's more weighted towards those middling value hands than betting big just to get called by like pocket sixes, that's like, well, how no way this guy hit an 8 or a jack is makes a lot of sense.
Right, and am I even taking that sizing if I hit an 8 or a jack? Like, probably not. So
right.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. It's sort of a weird one. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I think there's probably merit to bet small, bet big, and check on the river. I think they probably all have some kind of merit. I kind of think your small bet is probably the highest EV. I think that that is going to make money the most because you are going to get called by these middling hands, and you might get him to bluff. So
right. Whereas if you check, he's probably bluffing a lot, but you're not getting any value from the middling hand. So it's yeah. Okay, well, nice hand and good to win some money anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it worked out for me, so I can't complain. All right, so so you've got a second hand for us.
I do. So this is the same game. This is I built my stack up a bit after the previous hand, so or I guess I got stacked that hand, so I rebought, and I'm sitting actually around.
Yeah. You built it up.
I built it back up with the help of my wallet.
Chipping a chair, baby.
And I'm sitting, the effective stack is actually going to be the villain in the sand who's going to be on the button. He's got about 200. I'm in the big blind for this hand, and a little bit of info on the villain. This guy basically bought in for 100 twice, and he's been jamming a lot, even when it doesn't really make sense. I think he was actually the guy who jammed for 3x pot. Earlier, he had about 120. I had the straddle on, and he just jammed over 2 limps with 9-10 of spades. So he's been kind of throwing his stack around, just if his stack fits in his hand, he throws it onto the table.
That's awesome. So this is a great player. And you said what was the effective stack again?
200. So I wouldn't call him a maniac. It's not like he's just kind of jamming whatever. It looks like he is trying to jam hands that have some value. He's thinking a little bit.
Yeah, he's thinking the perfect amount. I mean, this is great. This guy should start a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. You should invite him on. So it's going to fold around to him on the button in this hand, and he is going to raise to 20, which is a big sizing for an open raise. And I'm definitely thinking about that, and I haven't seen him do these raises that much. He's mostly just jammed or called. Although he hasn't been sitting here for that long, maybe an hour, so that's not that many hands.
Okay.
He raises to 20 on the button. The small blind. Oh, go ahead.
I was just what do you think about really noticing people's raise sizes in low stakes games? How much do you feel it is when someone raises unusually large, it is reflective of them actually having some kind of nuttish hand, like aces or kings? In your experience, how is it less than a quarter of the time? Is it almost all the time? Where roughly does that fall?
Yeah, I think it's less, and I think it's one of these weird leveling things where people think that when you bet big, you're not doing it with strong value hands. But then people don't, but then it kind of induces people to do it with strong value hands. So it's kind of one of these cyclical things where I think it really can be either with most opponents, although I definitely have seen some players, raise a lot bigger with their strong value. So I'd say it's player dependent, but overall, not necessarily indicative.
Yeah, I think that That's fair. And I would say, it could be a Florida poker thing, but in my experience, when people open raise big, they usually do have some kind of nutty hand. And I think I discount it too much. I'm like, it might not be that. And I kind of like talk myself out of it. But so often, I think it's more than 3/4 of the time when a low stakes player is raising something rather large, like, to like 10x or something like that, in a 1-2 game, raising it to $20, and they haven't done that before. Obviously, if someone's raising to $20 every time they raise, that doesn't mean anything. But it tends to be like aces or kings. That's just been my experience. And it's playing exploitatively, that thing we were talking about earlier, you could just fold, but
yeah. Well, I would say, yeah, exactly. And I would say I've definitely noticed that less than you, I think, given just in general, but it's definitely good to keep track of. And, if you see players doing that, to actually see what they show if they get to showdown or if they happen to show their hand, because when you get aces and win, you have to show it, whatever. People do all sorts of, people do the craziest stuff.
Yeah, and then there's the guys who every time they get aces, they go all in pre because they don't want to get a bad beat.
Well, and they usually get their wish.
They do. They do win those blinds.
So in this case, the villain is going to raise up to 20 on the button. I have ace of spades, 5 of clubs, which I hate playing offsuit aces. But in this case, I'm in the big blind, and it was a button open, which means theoretically his range can be pretty darn wide. And I do feel that he's probably raising like a lot of hands to steal the blinds. So I decide to defend here with an ace.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Like, you can't make that many nut hands with ace 5, but you can make some strong hands, and I don't have a problem with the call. Yeah.
Cool. So the flop is going to come out with 40 in the pot, king of hearts, 10 of hearts, 5 of spades.
Oh boy.
So I make bottom pair. Obviously, it is a board that favors my opponent. He can have, set of kings, set of tens. I am blocking some strong hands. I'm blocking ace king, blocking aces. That's about it.
Sorry, is there a flush draw on this flop or no?
Yes, there is. There's the king 10 of hearts.
King 10 of hearts, and you do not have a heart.
Correct. I've got black ace of spades, 5 of clubs.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
So I check, as I think I'm going to do with all of my hands here, except maybe pocket fives.
No,
very balanced.
I think you just, I just got to check everything. Yeah.
I would just check everything. Yeah. And he bets 21.
He's upcharging.
So he goes right around half pot.
Yeah.
And I elect to call here, which sure. I think I maybe shouldn't, given the stack depth. I call and he's got about 2x pot left. So after my call, the pot is 80-ish. He's got about 160 behind.
No, I like a call here. I think that continuing, except in the most extreme cases, I really like to continue on the flop with any pair that's not an under pair.
When we're heads up, it's like, and I won it. There was another hand that I thought about bringing on here and didn't because I made an embarrassing call pre-flop with 5-4 offsuit in the straddle. And then, I basically, everyone else folded to the aggressor's flop bet. So I called, and then because I made bottom pair, and then it got better as we went on. And I was thinking, thank you everyone else for letting this remain heads up.
Yeah. Well, so, yeah, I think you have to call, and I think this, although, there are some hands that you need when you're constructing your range of thinking ahead in future streets. It's there are some hands that I will check call the flop with and check fold to a turn bet, and this seems like a great candidate, depending on the turn, of course. So
I tend to agree. I think if the pot's 80, if the turn comes a brick and he bets 40 or 30 or something, then I'm gonna happily send my cards into the muck.
Sure. Okay. But I'm guessing that's not what happens here.
So the turn is going to roll off the 3 of clubs, which is a brick. Total brick.
Yep, absolutely.
I check, and the villain now, without thinking too much, grabs the rest of his stack and throws it in the middle.
Okay.
So this is, this is a really interesting situation for me because I was I really got put into the blender, and I think this is another time where I was just kind of overthinking a bit when it's really like what. But we'll get to the end eventually. But in this case, basically my thought process was like, he should be polarized here again. He should be doing this with like really strong hands, like basically aces, kings, tens, ace king, maybe ace king, and some people probably won't even do it, although they might. And flush draws, which I am totally unblocking. He shouldn't really have some random, ace, something like ace 10, queens, jacks, nines. I guess he could have king 10 as well. He's probably raising with king 10 suited and limping, king 10 offsuit if I had to guess at this player's, frequencies.
Okay. I hear you. But I'm hearing that you're considering a call here, and I'm a little perturbed. But okay, so sure, he's polarizing, and you're thinking what?
I mean, I'm basically thinking like, wow, like what is he like? I'm trying to think about hands that he's doing this with, basically.
Sure, you're thinking he's got some nuttish type hand that he's really excited about, or he's just like completely spazzing, basically.
Well, or he's got a flush draw, is what I'm thinking. Like I don't have the ace of hearts. He could have ace x of hearts. He could have like queen jack of hearts. He could have like all sorts of like basically flush draws. Is like the big draw here that I think he given that he like shoved pre-flop with like 10-9 suited, he does seem like the sort of person to show up here with like a suited connector. Okay,
but now let's think about this from like a constructing your calling range perspective of like, minimum defense frequency and all this. So let's say you probably have king queen offsuit here, right? You're probably not 3-betting king queen offsuit pre-flop. I'm guessing in this spot. So you have king. So is that the best hand you have that's a call here? Like, I mean, as played, I think you're probably raising most of your 2 pairs on the flop. So I'm guessing
I think that's fair.
So king queen off is probably the best hand you'd call with here. Would you call with king queen off?
I think king queen no heart. I think I would call here. I think it's a pretty easy call here. I mean, blocking the king is probably better than blocking the ace. I think like king. Yeah, I think and I think like you're actually beating some of his value if he is just like spazzing with like a random top pair.
Sure. So yeah, I think I agree. Like, honestly, like you have to have some hands to call with here, and players like this, from how you've described this guy, are wild and wacky. So, I think you can call with king queen off. I guess let's go the other extreme. Like, are there any no pair hands you would call here with, where you're just like absolutely think this guy's full of it, and you're calling with no pair?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think, what's the, like, I might have ace jack here, I guess. I mean, I probably do have ace jack here, but I don't think I'm, like, calling with any ace jacks.
Okay. Are you calling with, like, king deuce? You probably call king deuce suited in the big blind, so you can have king deuce.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think king deuce is probably better than king queen, honestly. I mean, king deuce unblocks, like, queen jack.
Sure. Yeah, although it's, you might lose to, if he's spazzing with a random top pair, you might lose to having a back kicker.
Good point.
Okay. So so you're basically calling with all top pairs here. So it's like, all right, well, we'll call with all that. Like, you probably have a crap ton of top pairs that you get here with. So that seems like a reasonable place to cut it off. To me. It's a
I think
that's range.
I think that's totally fair. I think I was kind of thrown off here just because, like, he hadn't been called on any of his previous all-ins. Other than the one that I called, because I had, like, woke up with pocket kings in the straddle, basically.
Sure.
When he, like, jammed pre. So I was like...
So tell us about that. So he jammed pre on a previous hand with, would you say 10-9 suited?
10-9 suited. So he bought in for 100, he made a little bit, and then he just was like, there were, like, a couple limps, and he just, like, shoved from the small blind with 10. I was like, okay, I have kings, I'm going to call him, and he had 10-9 suited, which I was like,
okay. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if he's this wacky and wild. Yeah, okay, I see why you're considering a call here. Okay, sure.
Yes, but so I wind up calling, which I do think, and especially now kind of knowing the player, and I think I could probably have figured this out as sort of the player type that, he is the sort of person who he has some decent hand and he's just like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. I don't want to figure out how to play streets. I'm just going to get the money in.
Okay.
So, and here's an example. So he jams. I tank and eventually was like, you know what? I'm gonna call. I want to see what I just have to see it, which is not good logic. And I agree with you that cutting it off at top pair seems like a much more logical approach.
Sure.
And he looks at me and he says something that I did not expect to hear, which was, "Oh, you got a king?" And he shows pocket queens.
Oh my God! Yes. Oh.
And I was like, wow! Like I really did not expect.
I'm so angry that I didn't suggest that before you did the reveal, because this is like my favorite low stakes live thing of all the things is when they have a pocket pair that is not an overpair and they don't know what to do, so they jam. Like so often this happens to me, and it's like a great way to make, if you have top pair and you call, you're always good, but like it's like, oh my God. So this is like my favorite low stakes nonsense. Okay, so he has pocket queens. Wow.
So I was like, oh, see, like knowing that, I'm like, wow, like I would never have called here if I knew that was if that was part of his range.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like not even annoyed that he has that, but like, oh, he's just doing this with like second pair. So, which again, I think given the player type, I probably could have sussed out beforehand. Like, I'm not trying to defend my play. I don't think I don't think that it was a good call regardless. It's just like, wow, if I had known that, then I really wouldn't have. But I really should have known that, so I really shouldn't have.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it's totally. I mean, that makes complete sense. And I mean, I understand what you did. Like, yeah, I think it's a spew, for being honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this sort of thing where they, someone has like pocket fives and the board is like, 3 Jack 10, and they're like, I don't know what to do, and they just rip it in. I see that so often, especially down here in Florida. So yeah, I mean, wow, pocket queens. I mean, what a play. You think about like, he was so sad when you called him.
Right.
Because he's like, oh, I guess I'm beat. But like, he thought his hand, he also, in his heart of hearts, was like feeling like his hand was good when he bet.
Right.
He was betting, thinking his hand was good and hoping you wouldn't call. It's just like beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's just one of these things where, you're absolutely right that like that is a big part of like low stakes live stuff. And it's just not something, and with that in mind, it just is a very clear-cut fold. And I think even if that's not the case, I think you're absolutely right that like calling with like third pair is like, bad. Because there are so many better hands to call with, and you can't just call with any pair. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to be, a little like to construct a range, even when you're trying to play exploitatively versus someone who's doing some nonsense, you still have a range of hands that you can come to a situation with, and you should take different actions at different parts of the range. So.
And no, Josh, having the ace and unblocking ace, king, and aces isn't good enough.
Yeah, no, not good. Not good.
Anyway, it also the river then came the queen, so it was
nice.
So he really was less worried. He was like he breathed a sigh of relief as that queen came, which I found extra fun.
I love it. Okay, well, I guess we can get to our last hand here, and this one, this is just a fun one. It's one of those ones where as I was kind of making my notes to prepare for the podcast, I was like, what the hell was I thinking in this hand? Like, I genuinely do not know.
I just gave you 2 of those situations. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Even after explaining how I was thinking, it's like, wow, was that really what I was thinking?
Yeah. I mean, this is certainly like pretty weird. This is a weird one, but I enjoy it.
So
I was pretty excited.
Is this in the same sort of home game?
Yes, this is also an online, in that same like online type of game. It's also 25-cent, 50-cent. Different villain in this hand.
Was it the same table? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, this is the same.
Okay,
but it's way earlier in the night.
Okay.
So, yes, and I mean, these games, like I play in them somewhat frequently, so I know some of the players, and most of them I don't, but I do know some. Or I've played with some before, I have some history.
Right.
So, and in this hand in particular, the villain is a VIP.
Okay, great.
So I was very excited about this hand. And
we love that.
So for those of you who don't know, a VIP is, of course, a very important player. Someone who I would say everyone is very happy that this player is at the table. Is that a fair definition?
Absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
a whale is just someone who's happy to put money in. They don't really care if they're good or not. They're just there to play some cards and have some fun.
Yeah. Um, so this player is under the gun in this hand, and we are 10-handed.
Okay. That's worse than 6-handed.
It is just miserable. So, and it's not miserable. Like, it's miserable because someone is always like AFK. You know, they're not at their seat, and their their shot clock is going off. It's just a mess. So
that's really annoying.
Yeah. And this So this player is under the gun here, and I am actually on the button in this hand, and I'm going to be the effective stack at $52. So about 100 big blinds here because we're 25 cent, 50 cent.
Okay.
And this player opens to $1.50, which is the standard open size, and is called by the low jack.
And where is the villain in this hand? What possession?
Under the gun.
Okay.
Under the gun opens, low jack calls. I don't really have a read on low jack. I don't think it's someone who I've played with much. Or possibly at all. So low jack calls, and I'm on the button here, and I have 6 of diamonds, 6 of spades.
Okay.
And so, I think there's like a number of different things that are reasonable here. What are you like to do in this spot? What are your inspirations?
I think I generally just love calling here. You don't want to chase the whale out of the pot if you raise, which I think happens a lot when they're kind of opening a lot of garbage. We're on the button, which is like the best place to be doing some of this flat calling. Our hand plays pretty well multi-way. It's a great set mining hand. We're getting a wonderful price. Unless the small blind and the big blind behind you are like very opportunistic, aggressive players, I'm happy to just flick in the call and see a flop.
Yeah, well, so this is the thing. The small blind, who is to my immediate left, of course, is very squeeze happy. So I didn't really want to call because I'm not deep enough to call a 3-bet with this hand. So I actually just 3-bet myself. I raised it up to $6.
Okay, and I don't hate that. I just think, the biggest possible downside is that you may, if, for example, under the gun folds and then low jack calls again, you're going to feel kind of annoyed because you don't get to play with the whale, and now you have to play against someone who maybe knows what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair. And, so I think it's okay. I wouldn't 3-bet this hand a lot. It was just basically because of the player on my left, I decided to do it. And
that makes sense.
Both villains call. So, it works out. We get to play a large pot in position versus fun player. So, awesome. So the pot is $19.50. And by the way, no disrespect meant to this player. This player is a lot of fun to play with. I like this guy,
absolutely. And I don't mean whale or VIP as a derogatory term at all. It's like, if sometimes you just want to play cards and have fun. Everyone's done it.
Yeah. So, all right. So the pot is now $90.50. And the flop is pretty interesting. It's 8 of diamonds, 8 of hearts, 7 of clubs. So we have an under pair, but this is a board that is not going to hit our opponents very much at all. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it checks to me. So what do you do here if it checks to you?
I tend to play, especially multi-way, I do tend to play a little bit more straightforward. I probably just check back here. I think there are a lot of cards we could also start, barrel on the turn, or start turning turn our hand into a bluff if we see like a 5 or a 9 roll off that give us an open ender. It's not great for our opponents, but it's not great for us either.
Sure.
They probably do have like more 8s and more 7s in general than us. So I don't hate bet, putting in a small C bet here, because I do think that there's a high chance they miss, and there are a number of good barreling cards still. But I think I probably play it pretty straightforward and just check back.
I think that's fair. On paired boards generally, I like to do a lot of C betting. I think we'll have the best hand here sometimes. A lot. We'll have the best hand here a lot. And
Sure.
so, our hand could use some protection. We could, if we get check raised, we can fold. We should fold. And I think, that's the only problem here with betting, 6-6, of course, is we actually have a decent amount of equity, and it would suck to get blown off our equity by getting check raised, because versus, getting the opportunity to realize our equity by taking a free card. That's always the consideration. It's like, is your hand, do you want to sort of protect your equity by not reopening the action? But I think it can go either way. I did end up c-betting here. I bet the same amount, $6, a little less than third pot. And under the gun calls, which is great, and low jack folds, which is even better.
Awesome. So we're heads up, which we love. And
Yeah. So this is where I really, so the pot's now $31 and 50 cents. And this is where I really don't know what I was thinking on this street. So maybe you can tell me. But the turn is the deuce of diamonds. So that puts, a backdoor flush draw out there. Once again, the board is 8 of diamonds, 8 of hearts, 7 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. We have 6 of diamonds, 6 of spades. And once again, under the gun checks to me. So what do you do here?
Well, it's a pretty interesting card because, it doesn't give us any additional equity. It does introduce a flush draw, which I believe we do have the 6 of diamonds, right?
Correct. Yes, we do have. However relevant.
That said, if we had the best hand on the flop, we definitely have the best hand on the turn. And if he's showing up with some sort of non-believing overcards or a pair lower than ours, he might call a second street. Although I'm a little bit skeptical that he would wind up calling a second street with, pocket fives here. So, or on the other side, I don't know that he would really call with king jack offsuit either. So, I'm probably in favor of slowing down and checking here. I think we've put in our protection bet. I don't think we're really getting value from worse on a future street. He could have a draw. There's definitely, a lot of diamond draws out there. He could have come in, connected in a different way with some sort of straight draw, and be willing to call another bet. But also, if he winds up turning those draws into bluffs, we're in a pretty uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
So I'm probably in favor of just checking this one back and going for that sort of equity protection and just not wanting to get blown off our equity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we need to be mindful of stack sizes here, of course, too. The pot's 3150. I've got about pot behind. Excuse me. I have a little more than pot behind, about $40 behind.
Right, so if we bet and he calls, we're going to basically have a pot size shove, and I don't necessarily know that this is the best candidate. I say after calling with ace 5 on a board,
Exactly, yeah. From someone who's good at constructed calling ranges. I mean, here's the thing. So here's where I'm I really don't know what I was thinking in this hand. For some reason, I came to the conclusion on the turn in game that I was not good. Okay. And I needed to bluff. That's what I thought. And I actually think that's just really dumb because I think 6-6 actually has a ton of showdown value here. There's so many worse hands that called us on the flop. I agree. As you just listed off so many of them. And for some reason, I was you know what? I'm not good. I need to bluff, and I'm going to construct this as a triple barrel bluff. So I'm going to set up a shove on the river. And so I don't know. Man. But I bet. So I bet $10.
And by the way, the other thing here that I would maybe push back on is, what hands are we losing to that are going to fold? When it's 8-8-7, it's
absolutely.
He's got an overpair. Maybe he's got a 7. A 7 is maybe what we're targeting here, which I might say is a slim range. Trips for 100 big blinds. I don't know if this player is going to be laying down trips. I don't know. He's definitely not going to be laying down a full house. I don't know if he's going to be able to lay down an overpair. There's not that many draws, although having the 6s is nice in some scenarios.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know, especially for $10. I'm betting $10 into 30. I'm betting a third pot on the turn here. I mean, it's even a 7 really might is probably supposed to stick around. Maybe not every 7. Maybe like
Yeah.
7s with no heart is supposed to stick. 7 with no heart in the hand is supposed to stick around or something. But like, I think it's a really, really dubious turn bet.
Okay.
As a bluff. So, but that's what I did. And under the gun thinks for quite a while, but then calls.
And I would say, by the way, to your point about a 7 sticking around, I think it's okay if a 7 sticks around here, because if you're constructing the hand as a triple barrel specifically, then we're gonna get a 7 to fold most likely on the river.
Right.
I would
so
think the third barrel is going to do that.
We're gonna bet 30 into 50 on a brick, and probably 7s fold there. A 7.
And he also just shouldn't have that many 7s. I mean, it's a 3-bet pot. Like maybe it's 6-7, 9-7 suited. And that's about it. So
well, I don't know. Think about the history on the villain. If this is someone who actually play a lot of things. So he can definitely. Okay. I'm not really discounting any 7, to be honest with you.
Perfect.
So he calls, and so I'm thinking like, hey, on a brick river,
Yeah.
And the river is a 10 of clubs.
Okay.
So, that completes Jack 9.
It does.
And 6-9 if he somehow has that. So I don't know. So do you go ahead and fire the third barrel here? I mean, is this card like brickish enough that you go ahead and fire the third barrel? If you're taking
this is a really interesting. This is kind of an interesting card. It feels like there's just not like I don't know what we're really representing. I guess we're representing like 8-7 or like an overpair. I guess like if we're trying to get him off like 9s or jacks or something, like sure. Or I guess 9-10 that I'm not even convinced that 9-10 that runs in a top pair here is going to fold.
Probably not. So
it's one of these interesting situations where I'm still not sure what hands we're targeting with our third barrel, but I mean it is one of those. It is a card that's kind of a brick. Like if he has a draw, well. No, I mean, if he has a diamond draw, the diamond draw missed, I guess, is what I'd say.
But then I don't have to bet. I don't have to bet.
Right. So, most of his other draws either got there or made a pair. Like you're blocking all of his 6 draws, so it's unlikely he has like 5-6.
Sure.
So then he's really got like his draws on the flop were like Jack 10, Jack 9, 9-10, which all have either top pair or a straight.
Yep. All very good points. And I would like to think that in the moment, like also ran all this calculus we discussed and came to the conclusion that this is not a correct card to triple barrel on, but that really isn't what happened. All that happened is I chickened out. Out and I checked back the river.
Okay.
Yep. So total, the real moral of the story is that I'm the whale. But
aren't we all?
Remarkably, villain size, in an online sense. So it's like, oh crap, as his hand is revealed to be 5 of diamonds, 5 of hearts.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
That is I mean, now question, do you think he would have called your jam?
That's what I was like, I don't know. Like what I think no, but maybe it's very possible that I missed out on some sweet value with my with my 5th pair. I don't know. I was sort of like
pair. It's a great hand.
What's that?
It's third pair. Technically.
No, 10, 8. Sure, fine.
No, it's 8. Yeah, 8 doesn't count.
Sure, you're right. Third pair. I missed out on some sweet value with my third pair. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what was going on. I didn't even cross my mind that he might have pocket 5s there. So I was pretty like, whoa.
And that's just one of those hands where it's like, if he has pocket 5s, like you probably get 1 street of value, but you did actually get a second.
I got 2 streets of value.
So if you were going for value on the turn, congratulations.
Yeah, that's definitely what was going on there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great hand to end on. I think it's kind of one of those weird situations where there actually is a relevant leveling war, and it's not just about like, folding because your opponent always has it. It's like, he could be doing this with anything, so I have to call him with anything. And in this case, it actually wound up being like not that far from the truth.
Yep, that's true. It was definitely a hand I will not forget for a long time. So, all right, well, we gotta wrap it up here, Josh. I think I want to ask everybody to please, like this video if you enjoyed it, and please comment about how bad we are at this game in the comments, and say what you would have done if you've got some interesting lines you could have taken in these hands. Let us know if we should fold pre. And
and I'd also jump in if you're watching this video on YouTube. It's also available on Spotify now. If you wanted to listen to it in a more audio friendly format. Podcasts are great driving material. Feel free to find us at Bankroll Burners on Spotify as well.
Thanks for bringing that up, Josh. Yes, absolutely. Podcasts are great for driving. If you haven't tried it, super recommend it. Great way to pass the time on the road. So, all right, everybody.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.